Oh my God, get your filthy black hands off that door. You're stinking up the whole garage. The light died. Everything went dark. 3 drunk men shoved her into the corner. 1 blocked the exit. The tallest spat at her feet. Please, I just need my car. Animals don't drive. He pushed her harder against the cold wall. His buddy dumped her bag on the concrete. Wallet, keys, phone. Crushed the phone under his boot. On your knees. Laughter. Pick it up like the dog you are. She picked up each item without a word. He grabbed her collar, pinned her to the wall. Crawl out before I lose my patience. She stood, brushed the dust off, and smiled. What those men didn't know was that the woman they'd cornered in that dark garage had spent years training the most lethal soldiers on Earth, shortly before that night in the garage. Aaliyah Brooks woke at the same early hour as every morning. No alarm. Her body hadn't needed one in years. She laced up her running shoes in the dark, stretched her calves against the porch railing, and ran several miles through the empty streets of Riverside, Memphis, past the renovated lofts, past the new coffee shops with chalkboard menus and fancy lattes, past the craft brewery that used to be a tire warehouse where her uncle once worked. Riverside had changed. Years ago, it was a working-class neighborhood, mixed, modest, mostly black families who'd lived there for generations. Then the developers came, then the boutiques, then the young white professionals with golden retrievers and noise complaints. One by one, the old families sold and left. Aaliyah stayed. She ran a small bike repair shop called Second Gear, tucked between a laundromat and a nail salon on Greer Street. The shop smelled like chain oil and rubber. She fixed flats, rebuilt derailleurs, trued wheels. The work was quiet, repetitive, precise. She liked that. It reminded her of field stripping a rifle, every piece in its place, every motion deliberate. What her customers didn't know, what nobody in Riverside knew, was that Aaliyah Brooks had spent years inside Fort Bragg training Delta Force operators in close-quarters combat. Krav Maga, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, tactical hand-to-hand. She had designed combatives curricula for Tier 1 units. She had sparred with men twice her size and put them on the ground before they could blink. She left the military after a torn rotator cuff ended her operational career. The army offered her a desk. She chose Memphis instead. She chose silence. She chose a life where her hands fixed things instead of breaking them. There was a scar on her right forearm, several inches long, pale against her dark skin. She always wore long sleeves, even in the heat. When customers asked about it, she just smiled and said she ran cold. Her neighbor, Mrs. Evelyn Hargrove, was the only person who treated her like she belonged. Elderly, white, retired schoolteacher. She brought Aaliyah pound cake on Sundays and complained about her hip. She never asked where Aaliyah came from. She never asked why Aaliyah sometimes stood at the window in the early hours staring at nothing. The rest of Riverside was less welcoming. The woman at the dry cleaner counted change twice when Aaliyah paid. The man at the hardware store followed her through the aisles. Mothers pulled their children closer when she jogged past. Nobody said anything outright. They didn't have to. Their eyes said enough. And then there was Vance Whitaker, unemployed, son of Deputy Chief Raymond Whitaker of the Memphis Police Department. Vance drove a black pickup truck with a Confederate flag bumper sticker and spent most evenings drinking with his 2 friends, Devin Sills and Colton Branch, at a bar called the Wheelhouse on 5th Street. Vance had a habit. Every few weeks, he picked a target. Always someone who couldn't fight back, always someone darker than him. He'd follow them, taunt them, record it on his phone, and show it to his friends like a trophy. When one of his targets filed a complaint, the report disappeared. His father made sure of it. Vance noticed Aaliyah the first week she moved in. A black woman, alone, quiet, running a little shop in his neighborhood. He didn't like it. She thinks she belongs here, he told Devin one night. Several beers deep, she doesn't. Devin laughed. Colton raised his bottle. Aaliyah knew about Vance. She'd seen his truck circle her block. She'd heard his voice in the parking lot late at night, loud and ugly. She knew the type. She'd trained men who hunted men like Vance in caves halfway across the world. But she said nothing, did nothing. Because the whole point of leaving the army was to stop fighting. She didn't know yet that some fights come looking for you whether you want them or not. It started on a Saturday night. Alia closed second gear, wiped down the workbench, locked the front door, and walked the blocks home through the warm Memphis evening. Crickets hummed in the hedges. The streetlights buzzed amber against the darkening sky. She cut through the parking garage on Elm Street. It was the shortest route. She'd done it many times. Vance Whitaker was leaning against a concrete pillar with Devin and Colton. Several six-packs deep. Empty cans crushed around their feet like spent shell casings. Vance saw her first. Well, he straightened up, blocked her path. There she is, the neighborhood stray. Aaliyah kept walking, eyes forward, hands at her sides. Hey, I'm talking to you. Vance stepped closer. His voice echoed off the low ceiling. Are you deaf or just stupid? Probably both, right? Boys? Devin laughed. Colton pulled out his phone and started recording. You smell that? Vance sniffed the air dramatically. That's the smell of someone who doesn't belong. Like mildew, like rot, like something that crawled in from the gutter. Aaliyah stopped. Excuse me, I'd like to pass. You'd, like to pass? Vance mimicked her voice in a high-pitched whine. Listen to her talking like she's people. He turned to Devin. Grab her bag. Devin snatched the strap off her shoulder, unzipped it, dumped everything onto the concrete. A wrench, a water bottle, her wallet, her keys. He kicked the keys across the floor. Fetch, Vance said. Aaliyah looked at the keys, looked at Vance. Then she knelt slowly and picked them up one by one. No expression, no trembling. Just precise, controlled movements. The kind of calm that didn't come from weakness. Vance didn't recognize it. He saw submission. Good girl. He patted her head twice. Now get out of my garage before I make you crawl. She stood, walked past all three without a word. Her footsteps echoed down the ramp and into the night. When she got home, Aaliyah opened the hallway closet. Inside, behind winter coats she never wore, hung a faded olive-green duffel bag with the Delta Force insignia stitched on the flap. She touched the canvas. Then she closed the door, but she didn't lock it. The next morning, Aaliyah arrived at second gear to find the word spray-painted across her front window in red block letters. One word, the ugliest word in the English language. It dripped down the glass like a wound that wouldn't close. She stood there for a long time. Then she went inside, filled a bucket with soapy water, and scrubbed it off before the first customer arrived. It took a while. Her arms ached. The red never fully came out of the grout between the bricks. By midday, two of her regulars, white men who'd been bringing their bikes to her for months, walked in, saw the faint stain on the glass, and walked right back out. They didn't say a word. They didn't have to. That week, her revenue dropped sharply. Vance Whitaker sat in the wheelhouse nights, later showing Devin and Colton the video from the garage on his phone. He replayed the moment Aaliyah knelt to pick up her keys. He replayed it several times. Look at her face, Vance said, grinning. Not a damn thing. Like a robot. Like she doesn't even feel it. Maybe she doesn't, Devin said. Then we got to try harder. Vance flagged the bartender for another round. Daddy says don't leave marks. Use words. Words don't bruise. He tapped his temple. Smart. Colton leaned in. What if she calls the cops? Vance laughed so hard he spilled his beer. Calls the cops? My old man is the cops. Who's going to take her report? Officer Jenkins. He was at my birthday party last year. He wiped his mouth. She's got nobody. That's the whole point. Days later, Aaliyah found a dead rat nailed to her shop door with a note stapled to its tail. Last warning. Leave or next time it won't be a rat. She removed the nail with pliers, dropped the rat in the dumpster, filed a report at the Riverside precinct. The officer at the desk, a thick-necked man named Sergeant Collins, typed slowly with 2 fingers, asked her to spell her last name several times, then said he'd look into it. He never did. She called to follow up. The report had been lost. Not deleted, not rejected, just lost like it had never existed. She filed another one. That one disappeared too. Mrs. Evelyn Hargrove brought pound cake that evening. She sat at Aaliyah's kitchen table and held her hand. Sweetheart, maybe it's time to go. Find somewhere safer. Aaliyah stared at the crack in her kitchen wall. If I leave, they win. And I've never run from anything in my life. I know. That's what worries me. One night, a bottle crashed through Aaliyah's bedroom window. Glass exploded across her pillow. Cold air rushed in. Outside, tires screeched. Laughter faded into the dark. She swept the glass with bare feet on cold wood. A shard cut her soul. She didn't feel it. She was too busy controlling her breathing. 4 counts in, 4 counts hold. 4 counts out. Box breathing. The technique she'd taught soldiers before combat drops into hostile zones. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from restraint. Every fiber in her body wanted to chase that truck. Every synapse fired with years of trained response. Pursue, engage, neutralize, but she stood still. Broom in hand, blood smearing the hardwood. She chose not to fight again. Vance's father knew. Deputy Chief Raymond Whitaker sat in his home office the next evening while Vance bragged about the bottle through the window. "Clean work," Ray said, not looking up from his laptop. "No fingerprints like you taught me." Ray nodded slowly. "Good. Let her sweat. She'll pack up by the end of the month. They always do. And if she doesn't..." Ray looked at his son for the first time. "Then we make her life so miserable she wishes she had." This was not rage, this was policy. The Whitakers didn't see Aaliyah as a threat. They saw her as an inconvenience, a stain on their neighborhood, same as the spray paint on her window. Something to scrub out. The next week was the worst. Someone slashed all 4 tires on every bicycle inside second gear. Aaliyah spent money on new tubes. Devin followed Aaliyah through the grocery store, filming her on his phone, narrating in a mock nature documentary voice. And here we observed the urban creature in its natural habitat, pretending to read labels. It probably can't understand. 3 people heard. Nobody intervened. Vance and Colton cornered her in the open parking lot behind the mall. Broad daylight, pedestrians on the sidewalk. "Still here?" Vance said, arms crossed, smiling. "I got to say, you're stubborn for your kind." "I'm going home," Aaliyah said. "Home." Vance stepped closer. "This ain't your home. You don't have a home. Not here. Not anywhere." He gestured at the street around them. "Look around. Anybody helping you? Anybody care?" Aaliyah looked. A woman across the street turned away. A man loading groceries into his car kept his eyes down. A teenager with earbuds walked past without slowing. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody cared. Vance grinned. "See? You're nothing here. You're invisible. You're less than invisible. You're a problem nobody wants to solve." Aaliyah said nothing. She walked home, locked the door, drew the curtains. Then she opened the closet. This time she didn't just touch the duffel bag. She pulled it out, unzipped it. Inside, her compression top, her training gloves, her mouthguard, and a laminated card with a Delta Force creed printed in small black letters. She read the creed once, twice. Her jaw tightened. She pulled on the gloves, made a fist, then another. The leather creaked against her knuckles like a language her body had never forgotten. Something shifted behind her eyes. Not anger, not revenge, something older, something trained into her bones across years and countless repetitions. Readiness. That night, Aaliyah called the only person who'd understand. Sergeant Lena Navarro picked up on the second ring. They hadn't spoken in months, but Lena's voice landed like a hand on a shoulder. Steady, warm, no questions. First, Aaliyah told her everything. The spray paint, the rat, the bottle, the vanishing police reports, the son, the father, the system wrapped around them like armor. Lena was quiet for a long time. You trained operators who took down terror cells in places most people can't find on a map. 3 drunk idiots in a parking garage. You could end it quickly. A pause. But you do it stupid, they bury you. You do it smart, they bury themselves. The plan was simple. Aaliyah bought 3 small cameras. The kind that mounted with adhesive. The kind nobody noticed. One in the garage stairwell, one above the exit ramp, one in the corner where they'd shoved her. She kept every note, photographed every slashed tire, screenshotted Devon's video, built a file, dated, organized the way she'd built after-action reports at Fort Bragg. Then she started training again. Alone at night, curtains drawn. Her body remembered everything. The trap was set. All she needed was for them to walk into it. One evening, Aaliyah closed second gear, turned the deadbolt, and walked the blocks home the same way she always did. Through Elm Street, through the parking garage, past the concrete pillars and the flickering lights she'd stopped trusting weeks ago. She knew they'd be there. She could smell the beer before she saw them. Vance Whitaker leaned against the exit ramp barrier with a fresh bottle in his hand. Devon sat on the hood of someone else's car, legs dangling. Colton crouched by the stairwell door, scrolling through his phone. All 3 looked up when her footsteps echoed across the concrete. No way. Vance pushed off the barrier and spread his arms wide. She came back, boys. She actually came back. The 3 cameras Aaliyah had mounted were already recording. Red indicator lights no bigger than a grain of rice. Silent, patient waiting, just like her. Let me through, please. Vance tilted his head. Let me through, please. He repeated in a mocking falsetto. He looked at Devon. You hear that? She said. Please, like she's people. He turned back to Aaliyah. You're not people. You know what you are? You're a stain. A stain on this neighborhood, on this garage, on this whole damn street. He stepped closer. His shadow swallowed hers under the humming fluorescent bar. You want to know the truth? Nobody wanted you here. Not the day you moved in. Not now. Not ever. Every person on this block wished you'd disappear. They're just too polite to say it. But me? He tapped his chest. I'm not polite. Devon hopped off the hood and circled behind her. Colton stood, pocketed his phone, blocked the stairwell. 3 points of a triangle, Aaliyah at the center. She set her bag down slowly, placed it against the wall with the zipper facing out. I'm asking one more time, let me pass. The humor drained from Vance's face. What replaced it was something uglier, something inherited, something his father had nurtured since childhood, like a poisonous vine. Or what? He flicked his bottle. Beer splashed across her face, dripped down her chin, soaked into her collar. What's a dirty little black girl going to do about it? Huh? You gonna cry? You going to run? Call the police? He laughed and looked at his friends for approval. Baby, the police are on my side. Devon grabbed her arm from behind and shoved her hard into the corner. Her back hit the wall. The concrete was cold through her shirt. Colton closed in from the left. 3 bodies between her and every way out. You know what I think? Vance leaned in until his face was inches from hers. His breath reeked of cheap bourbon and chewing tobacco. His eyes were glassy and full of something worse than anger. Enjoyment. I think tonight we teach you a real lesson about where you belong. He grabbed her collar with his left hand, twisted the fabric until it pressed against her throat, cocked his right fist back. Aaliyah's eyes changed. Not a flinch. Something behind the iris shifted. A switch flipping in a machine that had been powered down for years. Her breathing slowed. Shoulders dropped half an inch. Weight settled into the balls of her feet. Her hands came up, not fists, open palms, relaxed fingers, a fighting stance that most people would never recognize. I warned you, she said. Quiet, almost gentle. Vance swung. He never connected. Aaliyah caught his wrist mid-arc, her right hand locked under his elbow. She rotated, one sharp surgical twist, and Vance's arm hyperextended with a wet pop that echoed through the garage like a gunshot. He screamed, his knees buckled. She guided him face first into the concrete, pinned his twisted arm behind his back with 2 fingers and her body weight. His cheeks scraped the oil-stained floor. His screams turned to whimpers, his legs kicked uselessly against the ground. Devon charged from behind, boots scraping, breathing ragged. No technique, no plan, just momentum. Aaliyah released Vance, pivoted on her left foot, and drove her right elbow straight into Devon's solar plexus. The impact folded him in half like a newspaper. Air left his lungs in one violent wet gasp. He staggered backward, hit the pillar, spine first, and slid down to the floor. His mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Colton hesitated. That was his mistake. He grabbed a beer bottle by the neck and swung wide, a clumsy, panicked haymaker. Aaliyah ducked under the arc, swept his lead leg with a low kick at the exact angle they taught at Fort Bragg. Colton's ankle folded. He crashed face down onto the oil-stained concrete. The bottle shattered beside his head. She stepped on his wrist, just enough pressure to pin, not to break, and kicked the broken glass away from his face. Seconds. 3 men. Aaliyah Brooks stood in the center of the garage without a scratch. Not a hair out of place. Her breathing hadn't changed. Her hands hung loose at her sides, open the same way they'd started. She picked up her bag, brushed the fleck of concrete dust off the strap, and slung it over her shoulder. Vance lay cradling his arm. Tears and snot ran down his chin. My dad, he gasped. My dad's going to... You have no idea what's coming for you. Aaliyah looked down at him. She didn't smile this time. Tell your dad. Tell the news. Tell everyone. Her voice was flat, measured, terrifyingly calm. And tell them I warned you. She stepped over Devon's legs and walked out of the garage into the warm Memphis night. What none of them knew, what Aaliyah hadn't planned for, was the witness. A young couple returning to their car on the 2nd level had heard the shouting and the slurs. The woman pressed record the moment Vance grabbed Aaliyah's collar. She captured everything from a clear, elevated angle. Every word, every shove, every second of the fight. The audio was pristine. By that night, the video was on Twitter with the caption, 3 drunk men cornered a black woman in a parking garage. Watch what happens next. It spread rapidly. Millions of views. It was everywhere. #justice trended in many countries. Retired Marines analyzed the fight frame by frame on YouTube. Self-defense instructors broke down her technique in reaction videos. Women shared the clip with the caption, "This is what training looks like." Men shared it with, "Those guys are lucky she stopped." But the reaction wasn't unanimous. Local stations ran the clip beside Alia's DMV photo, deliberately unflattering, under the chyron. Military-trained woman assaults 3 local men in parking garage. Half the country called her a hero. The other half called her a threat. And in a wood-paneled office on the east side of Memphis, Deputy Chief Raymond Whitaker watched the video on mute. He watched it several times. His jaw tightened. He picked up his desk phone and called the district attorney's personal number. "I want her arrested," he said. "Tonight." They came for her early in the morning. 2 squad cars, 4 officers, blue lights pulsing across the front of her apartment like a heartbeat. Mrs. Evelyn Hargrove watched from behind her curtain across the hall, hand pressed to her mouth. Alia opened the door before they knocked. She was already dressed, already calm. She held out her wrists without being asked. The charge? Aggravated assault on 3 victims. The officers cuffed her in the doorway, walked her down the stairs, and put her in the back of a cruiser. One of them, a young officer she'd never seen before, avoided eye contact the entire time. The other one didn't. "Heard you like to fight," he said, adjusting the cuffs a notch tighter than necessary. "Let's see how tough you are now." By morning, Alia's mugshot was on every local news station in Memphis. The photo was stark. Harsh fluorescent lighting, no makeup, her expression flat and unreadable. The chyron beneath it read, "Former military woman charged with assault on 3 unarmed men." Not self-defense, assault. The language was deliberate. Deputy Chief Raymond Whitaker had made phone calls before breakfast. One to the district attorney, one to the news director at Channel 5, one to the editor of the Memphis Herald. By the time Alia's booking was processed, the narrative had already been written. Channel 5 led with it. The anchor, a polished blonde woman with a concerned expression that never quite reached her eyes, read from the teleprompter. "A Memphis woman with military combat training is in custody tonight after allegedly attacking 3 local men in a parking garage. The victims say the assault was unprovoked." They showed Vance's interview next. He sat in a hospital chair with his right arm in a sling, a butterfly bandage over his left eyebrow, and the practiced expression of a man who'd been coached. His father stood just off camera. Alia knew because she saw Raymond Whitaker's polished shoes at the edge of the frame in the raw footage that would surface later. "We were just hanging out," Vance said, voice trembling with manufactured vulnerability. "Just talking. And she came at us out of nowhere. No warning. Nothing." He winced, timed perfectly, and touched his sling. "I thought she was going to kill us. I really did." Devin and Colton gave matching statements. Same phrases, same cadence, same lawyer. The internet, which had erupted in Alia's favor just days earlier, split down the middle. Hashtag Garage Justice still trended, but now it competed with Lock Her Up and Dangerous Woman. Cable news pundits argued in split-screen segments that generated more heat than light. One called her a hero. Another called her a ticking time bomb with a government-trained body. Nobody talked about the slurs. Nobody mentioned who cornered whom. The video was everywhere, but the framing around it had been carefully, surgically altered. Back in Memphis, the consequences stacked up like bricks in a wall. Alia's landlord slid an eviction notice under her door. No reason given, just violation of community standards. Second gear's front window was shattered overnight. This time, nobody bothered with spray paint. They threw a cinder block with a note rubber-banded to it. "Leave or burn." Her last regular customers stopped coming. The laundromat owner next door asked her politely, apologetically, eyes on the floor, to stop parking her bike out front. "It's scaring people," he said. He didn't say which people. Alia sat in her empty shop that evening, surrounded by bikes she'd fixed for people who no longer wanted to know her. The fluorescent tube above the workbench buzzed. A fly circled the ceiling. The silence was heavier than any punch she'd ever taken. Then the phone rang. "Miss Brooks, my name is Garrett Ellison. I'm an attorney. I specialize in defending veterans who've been wrongfully charged. I saw your video." A pause. All of it. Including the parts the news isn't showing. Garrett Ellison was middle-aged, silver-templed, and built like a man who'd spent his younger years carrying a rucksack through places that didn't appear on civilian maps. He'd served as a JAG officer before going into private practice. He'd defended veterans in excessive force cases. He'd won most. He drove to Memphis from Nashville the next morning, sat across from Aaliyah in the visitation room at the county jail. She'd been denied bail at Raymond Whitaker's recommendation and opened a leather folder. "I'm going to be direct with you," he said. "They're not prosecuting you because you defended yourself. They're prosecuting you because you won, and because you're black, and because the man you beat is the deputy chief's son." Aaliyah said nothing. She looked at her hands on the metal table. "I've already pulled the full security footage from all 3 of your cameras. I've pulled the garage's own CCTV. I have angles that show Vance Whitaker initiating physical contact. I have audio of every racial slur." He leaned forward. "But that's not why I drove hours to get here." He slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were complaint numbers with no reports attached. Separate incidents, victims, all black, all filed against Vance Whitaker over recent years. All marked closed, insufficient evidence, by the same reviewing officer, Deputy Chief Raymond Whitaker. His own father buried them, Garrett said. Every single one. Aaliyah opened the folder, read the names, read the dates. Her jaw tightened. The last entry was a woman named Tiana Moore. Vance had followed her home from a bar months ago, grabbed her arm, called her things that Tiana still couldn't repeat in the formal complaint she'd tried to file. Raymond Whitaker had personally visited Tiana's apartment the next day and suggested she reconsider her statement. She withdrew it that afternoon. Garrett closed the folder. "Tiana called me. She's ready to testify. So are others." He looked Aaliyah in the eye. "You're not the first woman Whitaker terrorized, but if we do this right, you'll be the last." Aaliyah sat very still. The fluorescent light hummed above them. Somewhere down the corridor, a steel door slammed shut. "When's the trial?" she asked. "Soon." She nodded once. I'll be ready." That night, alone in her cell, Aaliyah lay on the thin mattress and stared at the ceiling. She thought about the garage, about Vance's face when his arm popped, about the look in his eyes, not pain, but shock. The shock of a man who had never, not once in his entire life, faced a consequence. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she slept without dreaming. The courtroom was standing room only. Every seat in courtroom of the Shelby County Criminal Justice Center was taken well before the session was scheduled to begin. Reporters filled the first rows. Sketch artists sat shoulder to shoulder near the jury box. Outside, a line of people stretched past the metal detectors and down the marble steps to the street. News vans had their satellite dishes pointed at the Tennessee sky. Aaliyah walked in wearing a navy blazer that Lena Navarro had brought to the jail the night before. Her hair was pulled back, her hands were unshackled. Garrett had fought for that and won. She sat beside him at the defense table, back straight, eyes forward. She didn't look at Vance. She didn't look at Raymond Whitaker, who sat rows behind the prosecution in a charcoal suit, arms crossed, jaw set like stone. The prosecution's attorney was Harlan Cole. He spoke first. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury." Cole stood slowly, buttoning his jacket. "This case is not complicated. A woman with extensive military combat training. A woman trained by the United States government to incapacitate and kill attacked 3 unarmed civilians in a parking garage. She broke one man's arm. She fractured another's ribs. She did this not because she was in danger, but because she could. He paused, let the word hang, because she wanted to. He turned to face Aaliyah. Aaliyah Brooks is not a victim. She is a weapon, and weapons that cannot be controlled must be contained. The courtroom was silent. Cole sat down. Raymond Whitaker uncrossed his arms and nodded, a small private gesture meant only for his son. Garrett Ellison stood. He didn't button his jacket. He didn't pace. He walked to the center of the courtroom floor, stopped, and looked at the jury the way a teacher looks at a class before delivering the most important lesson of the semester. The prosecution just called my client a weapon. His voice was calm, conversational, almost soft. Let me show you what actually happened to this so-called weapon. On the night of the incident, he clicked the remote. The courtroom's mounted screens flickered to life. Camera angles appeared simultaneously. A quad split that showed the garage from every direction. Garrett played the footage in real time. No edits, no cuts, no narration. The courtroom watched Vance Whitaker block Aaliyah's path. They heard the slurs. They watched Devon shove her into the corner. They saw Colton block the exit. They heard Vance say, "What's a dirty little black girl going to do about it?" They watched him splash beer in her face. They watched him grab her collar and his fist. And they watched Aaliyah warn him. "Let me through, please. I'm asking one more time. I warned you." Garrett paused the footage on the frame where Vance's fist was mid-swing, aimed directly at Aaliyah's face. "That," Garrett said, pointing at the screen, "is the moment my client defended herself. Not before, not after, that exact moment. The prosecution wants you to believe she attacked 3 unarmed men. The footage shows 3 men who cornered a woman in a dark garage, called her an animal, splashed alcohol in her face, and threw the first punch." He lowered his hand. Everything she did after that was survival. Cole objected. The judge overruled. Garrett called his first witness, Colonel Marcus Whitfield, retired, years in Army Special Operations, expert in close-quarters combat assessment. Whitfield walked to the stand like a man who'd testified in rooms far more dangerous than this one. "Colonel, you've reviewed the footage. In your professional opinion, did Ms. Brooks use excessive force?" Whitfield didn't hesitate. "No, sir. Every technique she employed was textbook defensive restraint. The wrist lock on the first attacker, the elbow strike to the second, the leg sweep on the third. All minimum necessary force responses to imminent physical threats." He looked at the jury. "A trained Delta Force operator at full capacity could have caused permanent damage to all 3 men quickly. Miss Brooks chose not to. She used the least amount of force required to stop the attack. That's not aggression. That's discipline. Could she have killed them? Yes. Why didn't she? Because she's a professional. Professionals don't escalate. They resolve." The courtroom shifted. Jurors leaned forward. A woman in a row pressed her hand to her chest. Then Garrett called Tiana Moore. Tiana was young. She wore a white blouse buttoned to the collar and kept her hands folded in her lap. Her voice was steady, but her knee bounced beneath the witness stand. She told them everything. The night Vance followed her from the bar, the names he called her, the way he grabbed her arm hard enough to leave fingerprint bruises she photographed the next morning, the police report she filed, and the visit the next day from Deputy Chief Raymond Whitaker himself. He came to my apartment. Tiana said he didn't threaten me. Not exactly. He just said it would be better for everyone if I reconsidered my statement. He said things like this have a way of getting complicated. He said his son was a good kid having a bad night. Her voice cracked. Then he looked at my daughter's shoes by the door and said, "Nice place you've got here. I'd hate to see anything complicate your situation. A murmur ran through the courtroom like a current through water. Garrett introduced the complaint files, victims, buried reports, all black, all reviewed and closed by the same officer, Deputy Chief Raymond Whitaker. He displayed them on screen one after another. Dates, names, case numbers, the word closed stamped in red across each one. Then he played the final piece of evidence. Audio from a body camera that one of the arresting officers had forgotten to turn off during transport. On the recording, a voice later identified as Sergeant Collins from the Riverside precinct said to his partner, "The chief wants this one handled fast. Make sure the report matches Vance's statement, not hers. You know the drill." The courtroom erupted. The judge banged the gavel. Cole requested a recess. The judge denied it. Garrett turned to Vance on the witness stand for cross-examination. Vance had been sitting there watching his father's system disintegrate in real time. "Mr. Whitaker, did your father tell you that you were untouchable?" Vance's attorney objected. Overruled. Vance looked at his father in the gallery. Raymond Whitaker stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, giving nothing. "Mr. Whitaker, answer the question." Vance swallowed. His Adam's apple bobbed. His eyes were wet. He said they'd never touch me. He said no matter what happened, he'd make it go away. His voice broke. He always made it go away. The jury deliberated briefly. Not guilty, unanimous. The courtroom broke open like a dam. Cheering, crying, strangers hugging strangers. The sketch artist couldn't draw fast enough. Aaliyah sat perfectly still, her hands flat on the table. Tears ran down her face in 2 straight lines, silent the way soldiers cry. Without sound, without movement, just water falling. Lena pushed through the gallery railing, wrapped her arms around Aaliyah from behind, and held on. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Garrett Ellison closed his leather folder, clicked his pen, and smiled for the first time in weeks. The verdicts came down like dominoes. Vance Whitaker was convicted of assault with a hate crime enhancement. The judge, a woman who had presided over the bench for years and never once raised her voice, looked at Vance for a long time before she spoke. "Mr. Whitaker, you cornered a woman in a dark place. You called her names designed to strip her of her humanity. You threw alcohol in her face. You grabbed her by the throat. And when she defended herself with extraordinary restraint, I might add, you called your father to make it disappear." She paused. Years in custody, no early parole. Vance's mother sobbed in the gallery. Vance stood with his hands cuffed in front of him, staring at the floor. He didn't look at Aaliyah. He couldn't. Devin Sills received months for accessory to assault and filing a false police report. Colton Branch received the same. Neither spoke during sentencing. Neither had anything left to say. But the real earthquake was Raymond Whitaker. The FBI had opened a formal investigation during the trial. What they found went far beyond Vance. Over years, as deputy chief, Raymond Whitaker had buried complaints, all involving victims of color. He had reassigned officers who pushed back. He had promoted those who cooperated. He had built a system, quiet, efficient, invisible, that protected his son and people like his son at the expense of everyone who looked like Aaliyah. The federal indictment landed after the trial: obstruction of justice, conspiracy to violate civil rights, destruction of evidence, abuse of authority. Raymond Whitaker was arrested at his home, walked out in handcuffs past the same reporters who had once aired his son's rehearsed interview without question. He faced years in federal prison. Harlan Cole, the attorney who had called Aaliyah a weapon, was referred to the Tennessee Board of Professional Responsibility for ethics violations. An internal review revealed that Cole had knowingly suppressed evidence provided by the defense during discovery. His license was suspended pending investigation. His firm issued a statement calling it a personnel matter. Nobody believed them. Sergeant Collins, the officer who had processed Aaliyah's vanishing police reports, was terminated. The body camera audio, the one his partner had forgotten to turn off, was played on national television. Make sure the report matches Vance's statement, not hers. You know the drill. That sentence became its own hashtag. It trended. Hashtag Justice for Aaliyah crossed millions of views across all platforms. Profiles ran under headlines like "The Woman Who Fought Back and Won." Editorials published pieces titled, "When Self-Defense Becomes a Crime, the Aaliyah Brooks Case," and "The System That Failed Her." Aaliyah declined every interview request, every book deal, every documentary pitch, every talk show invitation. She said the same thing to each one. "I'm not a story, I'm a person, and I've got work to do." She used the community donations, raised through a fund that Lena Navarro had set up during the trial, to lease a warehouse blocks from where Second Gear used to be. She gutted it, installed mats, hung heavy bags, mounted mirrors along the walls, painted the front door olive green, the same shade as her old military duffel. She called it Iron Will Defense Center. Free classes every week. Open to women of all ages, all backgrounds, with priority enrollment for women of color and underserved communities. The first class had students. They stood in rows, nervous, unsure, some of them holding their car keys between their fingers, because it was the only self-defense technique they'd ever been taught. Aaliyah stood in front of them. For the first time since leaving the army, she wore a short-sleeved shirt. The scar on her right forearm was visible to everyone. "I'm not here to teach you to fight," she said. "I'm here to teach you that you're worth defending." Nobody spoke. A woman in the back row wiped her eyes, and the lesson began. A year later, Iron Will Defense Center had branches in several states, each one painted the same olive green. Each one free. Each one run by women who had once stood where Aaliyah's first students stood, nervous, unsure, holding their car keys like tiny swords. Aaliyah was invited to speak at West Point. She stood at the podium in the hall, facing cadets in gray uniforms. Behind her, the screen showed a single photograph. Not the garage, not the courtroom, not the viral clip. It was a picture of Second Gear. The little bike shop on Greer Street, with the faded awning and the grease-stained workbench. "People ask me what my greatest fight was," she said. "They expect me to say the garage or the trial." She shook her head. "My greatest fight was waking up every morning in a neighborhood that didn't want me, opening a shop that people avoided, and choosing every single day not to become the thing they accused me of being." The cadets didn't clap right away. The silence lasted moments. Then it broke, not into applause, but into something closer to recognition. The sound of people understanding something they hadn't understood before. Back in Memphis, Riverside had changed again. Not the buildings, not the coffee shops or the lofts, the people. The laundromat owner, who had asked Aaliyah to stop parking out front, was one of the first to donate to Iron Will. He didn't say much. He just handed her an envelope and a note that said, "I should have said something. I'm sorry." Mrs. Evelyn Hargrove came to every class. She never trained. She sat in a folding chair by the water cooler with a tin of pound cake on her lap and cheered like she was courtside at a championship game. When new students looked nervous, she'd wave them over and say, "Honey, if I can sit here at my age, you can stand up at whatever age you are." Tiana Moore enrolled in the class. She brought her daughter. The little girl threw punches at the heavy bag with both fists, laughing every time it swung back. Tiana watched her from the edge of the mat. She didn't cry. She'd done enough of that. But she smiled the kind of smile that only comes after something very heavy has finally been set down. The garage on Elm Street was demolished months after the trial. The city council voted to convert the lot into a community park. They asked Aliyah to suggest a name. She thought about it. She named it Second Chance Park. On the evening it opened, Aliyah stood at the edge of the lot where the corner used to be. The corner where Vance had shoved her. The corner where cameras had recorded seconds that changed her life. There was grass now, a bench, a small oak tree. She touched the bark, rough, young, alive. Behind her, the Iron Will evening class was starting. Through the open warehouse door, she could hear the rhythm of gloves hitting pads, the counting, the breathing, the sound of women learning that their bodies were not things to be ashamed of, but instruments to be trusted. Aliyah turned away from the tree and walked toward the sound. She had work to do. What would you have done in that garage if 3 strangers cornered you in the dark, called you less than human, and raised a fist? What would you have done? Drop a comment. Tell me, because I think the answer says more about who we are than we'd like to admit. If this story hit you somewhere real, share it. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. Hit the bell, because stories like Aliyah's happen every single day and they deserve to be told. Okay, real talk. This one hit different. Like a woman gets cornered in a dark garage by 3 dudes and everybody just looks away. Nah, that's why I told this story. Because Aliyah didn't wait for a hero. She became one. And honestly, that's the most gangster thing I've ever heard.